180 kilometers per hour in a fully loaded Dacia Bigster Hybrid, with the engine screaming at 5,100 RPM. Can this full hybrid SUV survive a 35 minutes high-speed torture test on the German Autobahn without overheating? This test is part of a longer European journey. Across the entire day, I logged nearly 870 kilometers, mostly on the German Autobahn, traveling from the mountainous southern Germany all the way up through the A7 corridor into Denmark. This was by no means an ideal setup for a high-speed run. 2 passengers on board, and every available liter of cargo space was fully utilized. The main boot, the underfloor compartment, the rear bench, and even the rear footwells were packed tight. It is a completely authentic, fully loaded road trip. The goal for today is simple: document the thermal performance, transmission dynamics, and real-world behavior of this hybrid powertrain on unrestricted section of the Autobahn, all while logging every single piece of live OBD data. The second part of this episode will share some road driving fragments from this test. But before that, let's check some numbers. Starting the day at an elevation of 500 meters in the south, the terrain immediately put the car to work. Under full load and packed as described, I could feel the hybrid system working much harder. On few occasions, climbing these gradient hills with the pedal pinned to the floor, the car noticeably struggled to build velocity toward the top speed. Navigating the Autobahn also means facing its realities. Endless roadworks. I was constantly forced to drop down between 60 and 80 kilometers per hour zones before getting any chance to open up the throttle again. Here begins the highlight of the day. A dedicated 77.5 kilometers high-speed test segment executed over 35 minutes at elevation ranging between 530 meters and 333 meters above sea level. The first major finding is related to the speed limiter behavior. The vehicle active cruise control system only functions up to 160 kilometers per hour. The moment you attempt to set it anywhere above 160, the system rejects the input and prompts an invalid speed message on the dashboard. That means the speed control is 100% manual. During the high-speed run, I pushed the Bigster to its peak speed of 180 km per hour. Due to calibration differences, the OBD display 182. However, maintaining 180 km per hour continuously proved impossible due to undulating terrain of the southern hills, roadworks, traffic, and short unrestricted windows. Because I couldn't sustain 180 km per hour long enough, the multimode transmission remained locked in 3rd gear and did not trigger an upshift into 4th gear. That kept the engine holding 5,100 RPM, which is the highest RPM ever recorded on this Bigster. As shown on the display, the engine generates about 93 horsepower under those exact conditions. Let's analyze the cruising RPM and engine speeds logged once the car settled into sustained cruise on flatter ground. At 140 km per hour steady cruise, the 4th gear holds around 3000 RPM. At 150 km per hour, the 4th gear holds just over 3200 RPMs. At 160 in 4th gear rises to approximately 3400 RPM. At 175, 4th gear settles at nearly 3700 RPM. At 180 km per hour, it would likely remain under 4000 RPM in 4th. A repeatable flatbed test will be required in a future video to log the exact 3rd to 4th transition point at 180. What about the temperatures during this torture test? Despite average 2455 RPM and peaks reaching 5124 RPM, thermal management remained rock solid. Across the high-speed segment, coolant temperature averaged 79 degrees Celsius, peaking at 83 degrees Celsius, against a full day average of 77 degrees with maximum 87 degrees. Engine oil temperature averaged 91 degrees Celsius, topping out at 98 degrees, against a full day average of 82 degrees with maximum 98 degrees. But again, the driving was not constant at high speeds for long periods. As we progressed north, the topography flattened out, but the weather and traffic conditions took over. Heavy rain, dense traffic, more frequent speed restrictions, and additional roadwork zones prevented any further high-speed logging, turning the remainder of the drive into a steady real-world cruising trip. Let us look at the financial and efficiency cost of driving on the Autobahn. Fuel prices at the German service stations were surprisingly high. I refilled 39 liters at a staggering 2.71 euros per liter, totaling 105.76 euros for a single fill-up. Here's the ultimate mathematical breakdown of the 12-hour and 33 minutes journey with the 10 hours and 21 minutes of net driving time. Across the entire 867.9 kilometers day, the Bigster consumed 47.28 liters of fuel, resulting in an overall average consumption of 5.45 liters per 100 kilometers or 51.9 UK miles per gallon, at a total moving average speed of 95 kilometers per hour. So what did the high-speed test actually cost me compared to driving normally? If I had driven those 77.5 test kilometers at the baseline pace of the rest of the day, which is 5.26 liters per 100 kilometers, I would have consumed 4.08 liters of fuel. The test actually consumed 5.71 liters, meaning 7.36 liters per 100 kilometers. That means the penalty of pushing the car to 180 kilometers per hour was exactly 1.63 extra liters of fuel, or roughly 4.42 euros at that crazy Autobahn fuel price. Out of the liters burned today, only 3.4% was spent on high-speed evaluation. The remaining of 96.6% represents pure real-world long-distance efficiency. This test provided valuable data on high-speed, thermal stability, RPM, gearing, and hybrid battery drain under extreme load, but it is not entirely conclusive. Drawing definitive conclusions will require longer periods of sustained high speed. Furthermore, the question of the third to fourth gear upshift at top speed remains open due to the elevation changes of these southern hills. Considering the context I initially shared, I think the Bigster handles very well at speeds up to 130 or 140 km per hour. However, when encountering a slight incline or require firmer acceleration, the system immediately drops down into third gear to manage the load. Once cruising speed is reached, the noise level, stability, fuel consumption, and overall vehicle behavior are more than adequate for long distance travel. Anything above 140 km per hour, especially when fully loaded, feels like an unnecessary strain on the system. It struggles both to reach the higher velocity and to maintain reasonable fuel efficiency. The electric vehicle component seems far less effective at those high speeds, making it a clear off-limits zone for me on long road trips on the Autobahn. At that point, you rely almost entirely on the combustion engine, which with its modest 109 horsepower output definitely works hard at those speeds. On top of that, with all the surrounding traffic, frequent roadwork zones and local speed limits, I would end up spending far more time trying to reach the top speed than actually maintaining it. I am genuinely curious how long anyone can realistically sustain top speeds on the Autobahn anyway. Regardless, I will retest top gear shift on a completely flat section in upcoming videos. I will also have future opportunities to test the car with minimal payload or no load at all. The multi-mode gearbox doesn't function like a conventional gearbox. First of all, the combustion engine starts in second gear. Second, it relies on only three main gears most of the time, namely second, third, and fourth gear. The fifth gear does not simply follow the fourth gear, as we are used to in traditional manual or automatic transmissions. Instead, the fifth gear can engage after the second, third, or fourth gear depending on the situation. This only happens during steep incline when the control unit detects heavier continuous loads. I personally find this powertrain concept remarkably efficient. It is certainly unconventional but effective. That efficiency is clearly reflected in the low RPM levels at highway cruising speed and in the overall fuel economy figures. Only time will tell if the architecture proves reliable over high mileage. One takeaway is that the hybrid system operates very differently compared to traditional diesel or petrol powertrains. It is something you must adapt to and try to understand before you truly appreciate how it works. Furthermore, with the 60,000 kilometers service coming up in September, the next major milestone involves pulling both engine and transmission oil samples for laboratory analysis to screen for early wear metals. I have already received positive confirmation from a testing laboratory and from a Dacia service center, which is willing to support me with the filming, getting samples, and then oil analysis. With 50,000 kilometers now completed on the odometer, I have less than 95% of the journey remaining to reach the 1 million kilometers milestone. I'll now leave you to the road driving and the OBD live data. Thank you for your ongoing support, drive safe, and I'll see you in the next one. filmez și pe tine, să-ți pun o cameră acolo. Asta că n-ai ce să faci, trebuie fixat așa. E înăuntru în șurubel care, e un arculeț care face chestia asta.